Powered by passion, it's National Auto Care's Fixed Ops 5 with your host, National Fixed Operations Training Manager, Corey Smith.
Welcome to Fixed Ops 5. I'm your host, Corey Smith, National Fixed Operations Training Manager with National Auto Care. I'm proud and excited being joined by Shawn, founder and owner of BDC Alchemy. Shawn, tell us a little bit about who you are and what got you to this point in your life.
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. Well, who I am is actually the company as well. So BDC Alchemy is a professional coaching consulting firm. Essentially, I assist dealerships by implementing what has come to known as business development systems that I put in place in order to create a revenue generating BDC. A little bit about myself. I'm going on 20 years in the industry. Similar to a lot of people, I got into it by accident. I started off 20 years ago washing cars. It was supposed to be an in-between job in the summer of 03, I believe it is, if memory serves me correctly. And 20 years later, here I am. So I've basically been setting up BDCs for Canada's largest auto groups. And I've recently started to expand my business off into the States very successfully. So I have a couple of dealer groups as well. As an individual, I've always really been curious, very intrigued by life, if I could say that, by people, processes, especially data science, data analytics. I love data. Numbers don't lie, people do.
Yes.
Sometimes. I've always been kind of curious as to what makes people tick. I guess Simon Sinek calls it their why. So in turn, it makes me very bold and extremely intentional.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited that you're on this episode. In other episodes, we've had topics that talk about the dealerships departments being one team, how F&I is similar to being an advisor, how parts is a huge part of the process, but we've never really taken a deep dive in this show into the BDC. So this episode is really tailor-made for you. It's titled Inside the BDC. So the core purpose of the BDC, what is it? What is it supposed to do?
Yeah, great question. That means many things to many different people, but what I've grown to make it mean is at its core, the purpose of a BDC is to provide a continuous flow of sales and service traffic to the dealership. It should actually do four things if done correctly. It should allow for a consistent customer interaction. It should absolutely improve customer communication. It should drive customer retention and ultimately improve CSI.
And that's a huge topic right now is retention, customer retention. I don't want my customer going elsewhere. Now, I started writing service 1998 was my first day on the job, right? We did everything. We bagged and tagged our own vehicles. We dispatched our own work. We made our own appointments and made the next service appointment or talked about CSI. Later on in my career, we had a BDC. And, with that BDC, us advisors didn't have to really make our next, the appointment. But I felt like I wasn't in control of the schedule. And it's really kind of an art form and a formula that you really have to follow in order to get your shop to be efficient. What are give me some reasons on why a BDC might fail?
It's a fantastic question. So basically what I've come up with, and this is of course my opinion, but I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've built 7, 8, 9 of these things. So I've brought it down to 4 main reasons in order. The first main reason a BDC would fail is when an owner is not behind it.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Like any other department in the dealership or in any organization, it needs to be clearly defined and planned out. So when the owner is not behind it, typically speaking, it doesn't give the BDC a reason of being. The second one would be when there's friction between departments. And I mean, this is every day we see this, like you just said it, you know, you're not in control of your appointments. So that would come at the communication between the BDC manager and the service manager or yourselves. So the friction between departments for sure. The third reason is when it becomes something that it is not.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Well, to really properly structure a BDC, because ultimately what I learned in my marketing, when I graduated in marketing, by the way, so one of the things that you really need to understand is that it's a business unit, right? Like any other business unit. Sales has an identity, service has an identity, parts has an identity. Rarely, when I'm doing my consulting and my coaching throughout my network of dealer groups, rarely is the BDC ever truly really defined. It kind of just like exists. It's kind of like just there. Typically, you'll see that the BDC is this mystical department somewhere in the dealership, in the old stock room next to the boxes, that you just kind of see people coming in and out of, and you don't even really know their name. So it's very important at the beginning, which is why that ties into when the owner's not behind it. It's extremely critical for it to be properly defined before you pull the trigger.
So how should an owner get behind it? What is one thing that you can tell the owner right now that's listening that they can do?
At the precipice of, before implementing a BDC, at the precipice, you need to define it. What do you want it to be? Is it a conglomerate of a centralized BDC? Because I build internet departments, or large scale centralized BDCs. Now, do you want it to do service? Do you want it to do internet leads? Do you want it to do CSI calls? Do you want it to do campaigns? Do you want it to do private calls? Do you want them to do all of it? So what I really mean by the definition is, if you have hypothetically 3 people doing service appointments and whatnot, and then at the end of the month when sales are down, you come in with a 2,000 name list and you ask them to start doing sales calls, then it becomes something that it is not.
Right.
And then what we often see is that there's a high failure success because the people are not well trained. And then all of a sudden what happens? Well, the BDC is no good. It doesn't work. Right. So it's going to be as good as the energy that you put into it, as the training that you put into it.
So let's just say I own my own dealership and I want to have a BDC.
Yes.
Would you recommend that the dealership have a BDC that does everything: sales, service, CSI calls, internet leads? Or would you put, 3 or 4 people in sales, 3 or 4 people in service, and move them around a little bit? Or, how does that look?
That's a fantastic question. It would all be dependent on what is required. If you have a strong sales team and the salespeople do their follow-ups and they're working their work and they're working their book, and you have a really good closing ratio, 12 to 15% on internet leads is basically what you're looking for. Okay. Yeah, that's an industry standard. If you're under 10, you definitely need my help. And if you're in between 12 to 15, you're doing reasonably well, right? So then maybe you don't want to invest too much in a BDC and you want to do something over at service. But regardless of what it is, it needs to be tailored to your specific needs. Like I said before, it can't just exist.
Okay. Yeah, you just can't have it exist. Exactly. When I'll go back to my experience when we had a BDC. Mm-hmm. I felt like they, as a service writer, I knew I did this, is that I would say, okay, I'm only going to do this many appointments, and that's it. When we had the BDC, they were able to maximize those appointments because in my head, I said I was busy, but in reality, I wasn't. The BDC actually optimized that time better. And that's what we're doing in service, is we're selling time, right?
Correct. Exactly.
So you can't go back in time. You can't make it back, right? So to have a BDC department that does all your appointments will maximize it, because the service writer will become better, the technicians will work faster, and the customers will be happier that they're able to make an appointment that's convenient for them, right?
Correct. And you know what? That's a great segue, because that rolls into my 4th reason why a BDC would fail. And I can't be privy to this, but when they are poorly managed. Okay, so your BDC director, BDC manager, or BDC team leader, really needs to understand the inner workings of whatever department it serves. The BDC should serve the dealership, first things first, okay? The BDC belongs to whatever department that it is serving. So let's look at service really quickly. Like I was telling you before, my first 11 years in the automotive industry, I came up through the service drive. I really learned my craft all the way down from washing cars. Then I became a jockey or a porter, as you guys would call it. Then I became an appointment taker. Then I did some reception. Then I did advisor. So what happens is that there's plenty of outsourced BDC companies out there that are doing phenomenal work. There's a lot of internal BDCs that are doing phenomenal work. What I meant by poorly managed is you want to ensure that the person at the helm of the hub of the organization really understands, like you said, with regards to service, time. We're in a business of selling time. Mm-hmm. So as a service writer, you're doing what, 12, 15, maybe 20 ROs a day.
Yeah.
You don't possibly have time to start answering phones, booking appointments, calling back messages from someone that wants to book an appointment. So if you're rerouting this to the BDC, which is what I would strongly recommend, but at the same time, there's a massive responsibility that BDC now inherits, and it needs to be properly managed, and it needs to be, how can I say, properly tracked as well. It's critical. So your BDC manager, I'm very strong into coaching. 90% of BDC Alchemy is coaching. And it's a mix that I approach with a little bit of emotional intelligence, of course. So EQ, it's a new big buzzword, but I've been doing this for a very long time. So emotional intelligence, and it's bringing out the best out of people by really coaching them on a daily basis. This is not something that you can just do once a week. So my onboarding for my BDCs, no one even touches the phone. Let's just call it BDC service. No one even gets on the phone before 2 weeks. I need to walk them through our shop. I need to see them stay with a technician for about 30 minutes to really understand that an oil change is not just an oil change, right? We really need them to understand that every 0.1 makes a difference, right?
So you got to paint the picture, right? Without knowing it. And before we really dive into my next question, you kind of made a good point there where you're waiting 2 weeks so they can kind of look at every different department, whether it's technician, service, and whatnot. What is the perfect BDC person? When you're looking at resumes, what are you looking for that it's going to make them a BDC person? Is it knowledge based? Is it I know when I look at service advisors, I look at your enterprise, your Hertz, or a waiter or waitress, those types of businesses. What are you looking at when you're talking about a BDC person?
I personally, in my 20 years, I personally hire off of attitude. You can teach anybody anything if they have the right attitude. Now, on top of attitude, that's not the only thing. So they're responsible for bringing a good attitude to work. I am responsible for attaching that great attitude and motivation that they're bringing. I got to keep them stimulated. I got to keep them mentally stimulated. And how do we do that? By understanding their why on day one. Okay, today's day one. You're coming in as here. And I hate to say, where do you see yourself? But where would you want to be? Where would you want to grow? And I can absolutely illustrate as of day one what it's going to take. And not just that, but tailor my coaching style to the individual to get them where they want to be. Do you want to eventually work in parts? Do you want to eventually be an advisor? Do you eventually want to go into sales? So that's one of the most important parts. And I was actually going to tell you that right now. Really properly structured BDCs, well-managed BDCs actually produce future leaders in the organization.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, if you think about it, if you use your BDC, and this is what I was saying before as a definition, if you define your BDC, let's call it as a training ground, you can essentially train. I've had plenty of BDC employees that have went on to be advisors. Advisors are typically where you'll see them over on the service side. You know, they'll gravitate after doing 3 years on the phone of doing appointments. You basically know the op codes. You basically understand the service maintenance menu. You basically understand where you're going. So what you have to do is you'll transition them over into a quick lube at first, and then you'll see them succeed in other areas. So using the BDC, basically, if it's well structured, using it as a training ground, first things first. And secondly, it's the hub of the organization, if you really think about it. Every single phone call goes into it. All the appointments are taken into it. All the internet leads come into it, and all the CSI calls are made from it. So when you have all of this data, why do you need to go anywhere else? And this is why I'm saying the owner really needs to get behind it, because everybody around will basically be telling them excuses. But the data, as we said before, numbers don't lie. The numbers reside in the BDC.
How much money can you make out of a BDC? Can you put a number on it? Average?
Yes, I can. Well, I'll gloat a little bit. My own returns, and this is real stuff here in Canada. So my best year was in 2019 over on the BDC service side. I was in a large, one of Canada's largest Mercedes-Benz dealer groups. I had a 9-to-1 return for every agent that was sitting down on the service side. Yeah.
Wow.
Over on the internet lead side, if you're not doing a 3-to-1 return, and obviously for anybody out there that it may, like, I'm not patronizing anybody, but basically for every $1 that you're paying, they're bringing in 3.
Yeah.
Right. So I got a 9-to-1 return on a service, and I got a 3-to-1 return on my internet leads.
That's amazing.
Essentially, at the end of the day, the BDC should not cost you money. It shouldn't cost you money. If your current BDC is costing you money, you really need to get in contact with me. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, humbly speaking, but at the end of the day, it should be a revenue generating department. Or why have one?
So let's talk about training, because you touched upon that a little bit.
Yeah.
So we've got the right person. You know, I guess we're still in that service mind frame. How do you train them? It's not like there's a book on being a BDC person. You know, what is the best form of training in your mind?
At its core, if you're building a BDC, let's say stay in that context, your team leader, that first hire, the person that's going to be the manager, needs to have all the attributes. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, you know, pick me, but what I'm saying is, let me just run it down for you. The life cycle of a BDC that I've come to know. So 0 to 3 years, that would typically be a BDC agent.
Okay.
3 to 5 years, you're looking at someone that's prepared to be a team leader, because they have the inner workings. They've been on the phones. They're now here about 5 years. So they should be able to articulate some kind of a strategy. 5 to 8 years is when you should basically be into a BDC manager. And 8 years plus, you're looking at a BDC director. Okay. Now, whenever you're going to select that first person, just listen to this show one more time. And as long as that they fit into one of these compartments, because each one obviously would have a different salary cap, but start at 3 to 5 years of pertinent experience in any department, and they should be able to get your BDC off the ground.
That's amazing. Thank you. What is one thing an owner or GM can do to make their BDC more successful?
Listen to them, be present, have what I call scrums. Scrums are not always meetings. Scrums are like, you have to be dialed into your BDC. You have to be dialed into the BDC. Like I said before, it's your data hub. So an owner absolutely needs to be completely aligned with the BDC. And as long as your BDC is properly defined, then the BDC manager will be able to adequately lead it into a business growth strategy.
Okay. Now I can only imagine that if the BDC isn't run properly, and I've been a part of a couple of them, they would make appointments for tire lights being on, check engine light, or in sales,
Correct.
Your tire kicker, if you will, that wasn't really serious about buying a vehicle, and that salesperson wasted it up. Just like we talked about earlier, if a service appointment comes in for a tire light, you've wasted time when you could have just told the customer, stop in, don't even make an appointment, we'll put air in your tire, no big deal, right?
Correct.
So
That's fantastic. So if I could segue, that comes into a culture. That comes into what type of BDC culture do you have? So BDC by definition stands for Business Development Center. Over the years, I've kind of coined, well, I didn't coin the term because it's going around, but over the years, my approach is a business development culture by having granular training programs. And you have to have this is what I always say, manage the data, coach the people. Manage the data, coach the people. Now, what coach the people means is, are you listening? Are you doing call listening? Are you role playing on calls? So basically when you're managing the data, if you're not getting the output desired, then you need to focus on your inputs. And the inputs is your people. The inputs is the people. So as much as you coach them, just like we qualify customers when they're coming in on internet leads, you can absolutely qualify a service call. Like, I'm not going to do a role play with you now, even though I could. But if someone comes in, there's a series of questions or there's a guideline that you should use before booking that appointment.
Yeah, because some people are going to work their pay plan and make appointments because that's what they get paid on.
Correct. And you nailed it. The pay plans need to work for the company as well, not just the individual. And all of this, and this is what I was saying before when I referred to my business development system. Again, there's a lot of great BDC companies out there, but I think because of my experience of literally being in the trenches, I understand everybody's point of view. And when I go into a dealership or an organization, the idea is to not have like these silos, like, okay, this is the sales department, this is the service department, this is the BDC. What a destructive culture. It's organized chaos, if you will, right? So when I go into a dealership, the first thing that I tell them, because I don't necessarily do one-offs, I'm more interested in the success of each dealership. And the only way that you can achieve success in a dealership is basically culture. You need to align the BDC initiatives with all the other departments. If they don't eat, we don't eat.
Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. So as we're getting close to wrapping up this episode, what are your 3 takeaways from this episode in your mind that a service advisor, a rep or a vendor, someone in the leadership team, or even the GM can take away from this episode?
All right. Well, for 3, what I'll do is let's talk about non-managerial, because I hate the word employees. It's so demeaning. So let's just talk about people in a non-managerial role. Please understand that where you currently find yourself is the opportunity. Similar to when I was washing cars, I was washing cars, but it wasn't who I was, it was my circumstance. In my mind, I was not a car washer. In my mind, I was already the owner of the dealer, right? So that kind of just makes you walk with your chin up, and it makes you aware of your surroundings. Self-awareness is important. How does my work currently right now affect everybody else, right? If you want to go up in the company, don't look for praise, look to build value within what you do. Okay, so when I went in as a car washer, I said, listen, I may be a car washer, but I'm going to be the best damn washer there was. True story, real quick. I actually went to my interview as a car washer in a suit and tie.
What?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I still joke around with the service manager. I still talk to him to this day. He's like, you do realize this is just for a washer job. But I said, absolutely. And this is how much I really want to get my foot in, because when I get my foot in, I'm just using this car washer as an opportunity to showcase what I can do. Wow. So the first thing that I would recommend to anybody is align yourself with the culture, learn the language, and recalibrate your thought process. If you have in your mind that you're a car washer, well, then that's all you'll ever be. The second thing that I would recommend is I would speak to the owners or the dealer principal, if you will. I don't necessarily talk about what right now. I don't consider what's happening right now the great resignation, as everybody's calling it. I look at it more as the great awakening. There's a lot of shifts going on right now, and the talent pool just got so much bigger. So what an opportunity do we have to recalibrate the dealership look, the dealership culture, and the dealership people. So if I was to speak to ownership, I would say to really focus on culture-based ecosystems. And that would require more leaders, not more managers. Simon Sinek nailed it. And he said something along the lines of, managers do things right, leaders do the right things.
Okay.
Right.
I
So
like
with
that.
regards to leadership, we need more leaders. And leaders lead by emotional intelligence. And with the ironic thing is, all the answers that we require to fix our dealership reside in our people that are currently in the dealership.
Yep.
Right. So that's the funny part. And the third thing that I would recommend is collectively, I think we stopped having fun in the dealer. Everything's about targets and bonuses and hitting your numbers, which is very important, of course, but it's chess, not checkers. So we need to start to have fun again. And by realigning the dealership across, not just BDC, but by realigning all of the sub-business units across the dealership, and everybody's working towards the same common goal, well, that to me sounds like a culture.
I love it. That's awesome. Those are great takeaways. If you want to deliver a legendary customer experience that keeps the customer coming back to you and encouraging them to invite their friends, their family into your establishment, then you've got the gold standard customer service vision. Do you want a more cohesive team that delivers a higher level of customer service that will result in more revenue for your dealership? We provide the tools, knowledge, training needed to unlock that potential of your dealership. For more information on this topic and others, or to submit a question or to be a guest on the show, feel free to send me an email, csmith@nationalautocare.com. Shawn, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode. And I'll end with this one last question that I ask every guest. Will you please come back?
Absolutely. If you'll have me, for sure. I got a lot of talking points left.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and listening to National Auto Care's Fixed Ops 5 with Corey Smith, powered by Passion. Be sure to watch and listen to the next episode on the 5th and 20th of every month.